Now to Alberta and what Premier Jason Kenney calls good news and bad news. First, the carbon tax. In a 4-1 decision, the Alberta Court of Appeal ruled federal carbon pricing is unconstitutional. The Alberta government argued a federally imposed carbon tax was a stepping stone that would allow Ottawa to interfere in provincial sovereignty. The court agreed, calling it a Trojan Horse. Heather Yourex-West joins me from Calgary tonight. Heather, tell us more about the ruling and what it means.
Well, Donna, this isn't the first time that a province has challenged the federal carbon tax, but it is the first time a province has won. Courts in both Saskatchewan and Ontario upheld the tax last year. And of course, the Supreme Court will hear Saskatchewan's appeal this spring. The federal environment minister says Ottawa will wait to see what the Supreme Court ultimately decides, but says he feels confident that the federal position will be upheld. Alberta's premier, however, disagrees, maintaining that provinces should have jurisdiction when it comes to planning climate policies. Donna?
All right. Thanks, Heather. And we'll come back to you in just a moment. The other big story in Alberta is about Teck Frontier. It's pulled the plug on a huge oil sands project in Alberta just before the federal cabinet was poised to give it a final yes or no. It had support from Indigenous communities and had passed all environmental reviews. Yet the company's CEO said there is no constructive path forward. Don Lindsay says global capital markets are changing rapidly, and investors and customers are increasingly looking for jurisdictions to have a framework in place that reconciles resource development and climate change in order to produce the cleanest possible products. And that, he says, doesn't exist in Canada. To be viable, this project also needed higher oil prices, more pipeline capacity, and more foreign investors. It's another sign Canadian political leaders need to stop fighting and work together on a coherent climate policy. Here's Heather's report on that.
The massive Frontier mine proposal was seen as a beacon of hope for this small oil field servicing company.
There were no real major projects that were being announced. To hear the news this morning, I think, was really devastating for a lot of people.
Teck Resources spent 9 years and $1 billion working the oil sands mega project through Canada's regulatory process. It had the support of Indigenous communities in the region. And despite questions around whether the project would be financially viable with oil down to $50 a barrel, the company believed it would be commercially viable. Instead, in his letter to the federal environment minister Sunday, Teck's CEO Don Lindsay placed blame on the political uncertainty around climate policy and the energy sector. The promise of Canada's potential will not be realized until governments can reach agreement around how climate policy considerations will be addressed. Without clarity on this critical question, it will be very difficult to attract future investment.
It's going to take some strong and clear leadership to send a different message to global investors, because right now it's pretty easy to see this as a negative on the end of a string of negatives.
Alberta's premier, who has been calling on Ottawa to approve the Teck mine since December, has been quick to place blame on the federal government. But the federal environment minister says he agrees with the points raised by Teck, that all levels of government need to get on the same page.
We agree, and we say we are taking strong action on climate change. We need to be working to collaborate with all of the provinces and territories. We need to be all on the same page, not fighting with each other over the price on pollution and those kinds of things. We need to be working together.
And there is support for a carbon tax across the energy industry. Teck CEO stated that support in his letter Sunday. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers reiterated that support today as well. It's really only a small group of provincial Conservative premiers, Donna, that are opposed.
All right, Heather Yourex-West in Calgary tonight. Thanks. This balance between energy growth, environmental policy, and Indigenous rights poses a big challenge for political leaders, federal and provincial. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson joins me. Mercedes, there's a lot of anger, a lot of finger pointing, and now this Alberta Court of Appeal ruling that the carbon tax is unconstitutional. Where does this leave the Prime Minister?
Well, Donna, it's another challenge for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who has faced test after test of his leadership in government since being re-elected. And today's carbon tax decision adds to that mess, playing into heated partisan rhetoric across the country. Mr. Trudeau was elected on 3 key promises: the environment, the economy, and reconciliation. And now all 3 of those priorities are colliding in a perfect storm that has rocked his government. Mr. Trudeau managed to dodge the bullet of having to make a cabinet decision on Teck Frontier, but in the eyes of some out west, test, he is responsible nonetheless. Weighing in, the CEO of Teck Frontier said that what was missing was a clear framework untainted by politics that would lay out how the country could reconcile resource development with climate change. That's something that Mr. Trudeau has not managed to produce. Instead, there's a failure of a highly symbolic energy project and also no plan to meet the Kyoto targets, much less the zero carbon footprint he's promising. Mr. Trudeau's commitment to reconciliation is also on trial, with Indigenous leaders condemning today's OPP arrests, and the promise of more protests and blockades with the slogan "Shut Down Canada" has the business community warning that there could be fleeing foreign capital from Canada and saying more big projects could be sidelined, with the economy being damaged if there isn't a solution soon. But make no mistake, this is not all on the Prime Minister. No other party has proposed a viable way forward on any of the three issues. There's lots of finger-pointing but no constructive talk. Several premiers refuse to bend on the carbon tax, as Heather said, and the same goes for major contenders for the Conservative leadership like Peter MacKay, despite shifting public opinion on the environment. There seems to be a vacuum of leadership and a plan on all sides. Donna?
Okay, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks.